the first round of the open section, I decided to go for a positional game for this one, and it was the game between Shonak Shivakumar against Lingxi Zhu. This was board 2 in the boys or open under 18, and it started as follows. Knight f3, one of my favorite moves when I was a kid, the reti, I was calling it, or Zuckertort, I think is also named on some websites. Knight f6, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, d4, d5. So you're thinking, okay, switch from a reti to some kind of a Catalan where black is copying what white is doing. But, you know, this is not a cause for alarm, because at some point, white, because it's the first one who makes the move, can make some more aggressive moves that would stop black from repeating the same thing. So castle, castle, and here came the moment where black wasn't quite as able to follow through with c5. I mean, this could happen, but I think people try to avoid these kind of situations. This is something that I know. So black decided to kind of set up their pieces in something that I call this pawn structure schlechter. I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me if you think it should be called differently. But it's a kind of system that is technically against this bishop. So what you're trying to do is say, well, my bishop is open on the diagonal, while, you know, white's bishop is restricted by these pawns, and, you know, I'll consider playing c5 at some point maybe, or taking in c4, but until then, I just want to make sure that this bishop will stay restricted. So Shonak played a4 to stop any kind of b5 ideas and just gain a bit of space on the queen side. And it was helpful because now that black recaptured knight a3, he's going to develop the knight and try to get the pawn back. Black attempted the defense of it, queen c2, another pressure on the pawn, knight a6. And this is a moment where Shonak played knight g5, trying to get rid of the bishop so that he could take the pawn. This was the first moment where Bianjin was not quite pleased with black's choice. I think I've seen people attempt this, but I think it's not going to work that well in this particular position. The problem, I think, is that you don't want to allow white to take this knight for you to have to recapture with the pawn. So maybe bishop f4 even was an option, because, you know, like if you take with the queen, at least you didn't utilize the fact that you took the knight there. Maybe e4 is an option too, and then this bishop has to move back somewhere again, or maybe here to attract some more weaknesses. But I think definitely black should avoid giving up that bishop. I would not give it. And after, you know, technically it was a series of 3 or 4 dubious moves by black that allowed white to now play this move, knight takes e6. So, you know, it was the reason for my choice of the game, because I love playing, when I play, you know, against weak pawn structures, against pawn structures that are easy targets for my pieces to be able to attack on the long run. It doesn't have to be immediate, but on the long run, I want to know that I can attack those pieces. And although white didn't get their pawn back, they're about to get their pawn back. They can take it anytime, basically, in c4 with this pawn in a4 and knight in e3, b5 is not possible. So white will get their pawn back, and then we'll have to focus on these 2 weaknesses that were created. Queen e8, e4, knight b6, chased a knight away, and now e5. And basically, you know, I just love how that knight went from the center all the way to c8. Notice a5 before pushing e5. And now e5, this knight is dead. Let's make it red. This knight is dead. This knight is dead. Doesn't have much to do. And all of these pawns are going to fall, and black's pieces are so passive. So you need to make sure you understand the way you're playing your endgames and understand how to be mindful about what pieces to trade when and how long, especially if you're going to take in c4 in a line like this, a Catalan or QGA. You want to make sure that you know how and when to stop protecting the pawn. I think even I don't think I've given you the best explanation here as to what was black's best choice earlier in the game, but you can clearly see how white was able to punish all of those mistakes. And Shonak did not rush with capturing any of the pawns. He took his time to make sure the center was well protected so that these pieces could remain restricted. No counterplay on f2, and now finally it's time to take that pawn. e6 again, as I mentioned, is going to be a weakness for long run, and so is this pawn now. And in the next few moves, it's just kind of a matter of technique to see how he kept improving his pieces, and at the right moment he was like, okay, it's time for me to force things a bit, and that's only because of the small tactic that's available here. So he can put pressure and attack the knight. The knight went away. Maybe white wouldn't have wanted to trade that knight, but after all, it never went away from a3, so why not? And now, extra material gain is coming. Another weakness aside from the one in e6. f4, a very important move that maintains this bishop in b7, super restricted, and now white goes on to promote that a pawn. The rest is just a matter of technique, like they say. Took some more material, exchange up, and now queen f3, finally black decided to resign. The pawn will be promoted, and it's game over.